Hoops Heaven proudly brings to you Basketball Hustle, featuring your hosts, the writer, Chris Pike, and the scoring machine, Shawn Redhage. Now it's time for another episode of Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Hoops Heaven's Basketball Hustle. I'm Chris Pike, your co-host. Plenty happening in the world of the NBL. We're recording this fresh on Friday following a big game up in Cairns where the Perth Wildcats further closed in on top spot on the NBL ladder. So it's going to be fascinating to see how the rest of the weekend pans out. Plenty to talk about on this show. It's going to be a special edition of the podcast as well this week, where we will have our mid-season recap. So we'll have a look at all the award winners that we think are deserving at the halfway point of the season, have a look at the high points and the low points of the season, have a look at who we think's on track to win the championship so far, who's on track to finish top four, and I guess who's on track to finish with the wooden spoon as well. So plenty to get through on this week's show. Let's get straight into it. Joining me as always is Shawn Redhage. Shawn, how are you handling the heat in Perth at the moment?
Oh, I'm struggling. I think living over in WA is maybe a little soft. You know, growing up in Nebraska, out in the cornfields, I used to tassel corn in this heat, but I can't handle it at the moment.
Yeah, I guess the thing about it is that it's just ongoing, isn't it? You can handle 1 or 2 days of 40 degrees, but when you have sort of 10 out of 11 or 12 days that are 40 degrees, and especially for you when you're working outside with the kids at the moment, it must be tough. Yeah,
it's hard. The kids are a little bit more grumpier than you would normally be when they've been in school on 40-degree days. But anytime you can shoot the basketball and get outside and play some basketball is a good thing. But let's get into what we're here to talk about, the NBL and everything that's happening.
Absolutely, because we've got plenty happening. And round 11 of the league got underway on Thursday night up in Cairns. 2 of the form teams of the competition did battle, with Cairns going into that game on a 3-game winning streak, and they'd moved into the top 4 position as well on the back of that. And to me, they were playing the most exciting basketball of the entire league coming into the round as well. But heading up to Cairns was a Perth Wildcats team that wouldn't have been happy to have lost twice already to Cairns this season. They had some added motivation with, I guess, Trevor Gleeson coaching his 400th game. They'd been in Cairns all week as well, which I think was a bonus. They went straight from Melbourne up to Cairns, and I think Cairns did the very same thing when they came to Perth earlier in the season. And I think sometimes that helps, especially on those bigger trips, and it can help you acclimatise. You'll know a lot more about that than me. But before we dissect the rest of what's happening in the league, let's get straight into our thoughts on that Thursday night game. Really important win for the Wildcats. It puts them within reach of top spot as well. Depending on what happens across the rest of the round, they might even finish round 11 on top of the ladder if the Kings lose to Melbourne United. But a 4-point win in the end for the Wildcats, and to me, I think every time Nick Kay, Bryce Cotton and Tariko White play well together, I don't know if this Wildcats team can be beaten. How do you see it?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're talking 2 teams that were probably the 2 informed teams in the league at the moment, and what a couple weeks change for the Perth Wildcats as well. 2 losses before last week, and then they get the huge win, Sydney, go over to Southeast Melbourne, Phoenix. And you're right with that trip to Cairns. Anytime you're able to go up there for a few days, it's a different weather than anywhere else in Australia, just that humidity. So I think they're able to acclimatize. And I know the Wildcats usually use that as a team building event as well, going up to Port Douglas and possibly even going to the Croc Farm. So, it's a chance to kind of, I guess, in the mid-season, kind of build up those relationships and build up that team bonding. And it looked like they're playing a little bit better as a team as well. And to me, the difference has just been their intensity on the offensive and defensive glass. So their rebounding over the last few days, or games, should I say, has been first rate. And when they were coming in 2 rounds ago as the last in defensive rebounding, which is almost unheard of for a Perth Wildcat team. So I'm sure Trevor Gleeson really challenged. And I guess Cairns played extremely well. I thought, they're probably a bit unlucky not to get that win. I love what Scott Machado and Cam Oliver bring to that team. And, their asking price after this season has got skyrocketed with the season that they're having. So they're a fun group to watch. Mike Kelly has them playing well. I thought, that lineup that Trevor Gleason put in the fourth quarter, going a little bit of small ball, Jesse Wagstaff at the 4, Nick Kay at the 5. And then they had 3 shooters out there, Bryce Cotton, Tarico White, and Clint Stein. Really changed the game and made the game plan for the Taipans a little hard to guard and probably opened the floor up. You saw Jesse hit some threes, and he was fantastic for those first few minutes of the fourth quarter. I thought was a difference maker.
Yeah, and sometimes when you've got the big 3 like we talked about with Tarico, Bryson and Nick Kay, you need somebody else that can set the tone. And in the last couple of years, it's been Greg Hire that's done that sort of thing. I remember there was a game last year where it was in Perth, Adelaide was in town, and the 36ers were controlling the game, but then Greg hit it. He nailed a big screen on Harry Froling, had a bit of a fracas out of that, and it changed the whole momentum of the game. And sometimes those are the things that can turn things around. And Jesse's probably now that player that has to take on that role for the Wildcats, and he did that this week, and he was as important as anybody in turning the result around. He put his body on the line. He made some physical plays. He made let's be honest, he made a flop that he got called in his way, which did at that time turn the momentum when he had the call go against Scotty Machado, and then to start the fourth quarter, he hit those big shots as well, and also attack the offensive rebounds. You've got the big players that can make the big shots, but you just need that. Not quite an enforcer, because he's not an enforcer, but he plays that role that he can turn the tide of a game without necessarily having to do it on the stat sheet.
Yeah, well, and Trevor Gleason's got confidence. It seems like they're going that rotation more, I guess, less Reese Big, and Jesse's getting a few more minutes, probably making the most of it. Jesse's shooting the ball a lot better this year as well, which I think is helping their offensive structure and flow. And Clint Stondal's been pretty outstanding the last few weeks as well. So he didn't have a great game up in Cairns, but the previous ones, he was a difference maker for the Cats. So they do have that firepower off the bench. I don't think they're always going to be consistent because Trevor Gleason's minutes there for the bench is changes from game to game, but they do have that advantage. And I thought the subbing by Trevor Gleason in that fourth quarter and just changing the lineup was a big reason why they got the win. And that's 400 games of NBL experience, knowing which buttons to push, and it was a great win for the Wildcats.
Yeah, it was. And you're right. They probably don't go as deep as they have in previous seasons. The depth has been the great strength. I think the championships they've won in recent years has been because they go so deep. But right now they don't go as deep, but I don't think they've had as big of a 3 players as influential as what Bryce, Nick and Tarico are either. Looking across the league, is that the best big 3 combination in the league right now?
Well, I mean, they're very good. I mean, you can't go past the Sydney Kings in the lineup that they have. I think they've got one of the most talented lineups that we've ever seen assembled in the NBL. So, they got Casper Ware and Andrew Bogut, Kevin List, Jason Tate, Didi Lozada, Brad Newley. Let's not forget him, who's, Olympian and Boomer. So, it's it's tough to go past those 3. I think that they talked about in the broadcast last night, you've got Tarico White just hits big shots. He doesn't shoot great percentage, but just makes them at the right time. He even banks them in when he needs to. So it was, and then obviously Bryce Cotton is a class above every other player, I think. But and then Nick Kay just does all the little things. So they complement each other very well.
It was a very high standard game. I would be willing to say it was probably the highest quality contest we've seen just about this season. I thought both teams played really, really well, so I wouldn't be too discouraged if I was Cairns. And you're right, Scotty Machado and Cam Oliver, the chemistry they have together is unbelievable. Those alley-oops that they put together in that game were. They have to be the 2 best that we'll see this season, especially that first one where Machado first up crossed over Damo and almost broke his ankles and then delivered the alley-oop. Jesus, it's exciting to watch players like that, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the way Machado can pass the ball, the way Cam Oliver can rebound, block shots, hit threes, active. He is a fun player to watch as well. And I hope that we can keep him in our league as well, both those guys, because I think there'll be a lot of teams chasing them after the season's over.
We see it year after year that a team like Cairns can bring in a player like, especially Machado, because we've seen it with Travis Trice and we've seen it with Melo Trimble now, that they bring in a guy, give him a chance and he shines for a season and then they go to a big money club. Would you like to be able to see the Taipans keep those two together rather than see them end up potentially at a Perth or a Sydney or a Melbourne next season?
I would, and if I'm the Taipans, I'm sure they're talking to their agents, and their agents probably wanting to hold off, but try and keep those guys. I mean, you're not going to find a better quality point guard and big man in the league. You know, I'd put Cam Oliver right there, up there with Sean Long and Machado as well, and the Casper Ware, Bryce Cott caliber. Probably not at that scoring that those two guys have, but the way he passes the ball is just a fun to watch. And also, if I'm a player, I want to play with Scott Machado.
Yeah.
You know, he's going to be able to attract players to him just the way he can pass the ball to the floor.
I dare say we'll hear more about both of them later when we have a look at our mid-season awards later in the show. Another thing from a Taipans point of view that I need to get your thoughts about. He's a former teammate of yours. I've had a bit of fun with it at times during the season with the work I'm doing for the Taipans. The haircut that Jared Kenny's pulling at the moment, it was freshly manicured this week. What are your thoughts?
I'm just lost for words every time I see it. I watching the game last night, I'm telling my wife Gretchen, can you believe he still has that haircut? I thought it was just kind of a preseason, just for a laugh, but sure enough, he's sticking with it. And credit to him. That's Jared Kenny for you. You're not going to see that too often. Let's just hope it doesn't become a mainstay with the rest of the league as well. But credit to Jared Kenny for sticking with it.
It really is something pretty special. I can't imagine you would have ever sported anything quite like that. Have you, Shawn?
No, but I did. One of my teammates in college, actually my roommate, Justin Allen, he had cancer, and so as a sign of solidarity with Justin, the whole team shaved their heads for the season, and actually it worked out that he went through chemo, radiation. He didn't actually lose his hair, but so the rest of the team did. But so that was probably about as crazy as you're going to see from me.
Okay, we'll have to dig up some of those photos at a later date. Before we have a look further back on last week across the league as well, your fourth quarter segment last week was talking about the releasing of player salaries, and you were a fan of it. You think that it would create some openness across the league and transparency, and in the long term, I guess the short term pain of the embarrassment of having your salary released would end up with a long-term benefit for the league, and you think it would be a great positive. A week on, have you had some feedback from that, and do you still stand by the thoughts that you presented last week?
Look, I think there's going to be a lot of naysayers, and I think there's going to be people that are for it. Mm-hmm. I just think that if you look at the long-term benefits, I think, especially from the player's point of view, and I guess I'm probably looking at it from a player's point of view, I think it will benefit the players and the league. Just kind of build in some transparency for the fans in regards to that. So it's a touchy subject, but I wanted to throw out there and see what the response would be. And I'm sure I'd like to revisit it a little bit later and maybe ask a few of the players as well. We know what Andrew Bogut's thoughts, but I'd be curious to know what some of the other players, maybe even coaches' thoughts on that as well.
I think all of the talking points you've raised in these fourth quarter segments are worth getting some more opinions on, because whether it's the 48-minute proposal, which I think is now a great idea and it links us closer to the NBA, so I think that's a positive given the Next Stars program. I think the idea for the Next Stars program to have their own team has a lot of merit behind it, and now the releasing of the salaries, I think you're raising a lot of good points, and it would be fascinating to put these questions to some of the people involved in the league, because you're not too far removed from it, and you only retired a couple of years ago, so I think you would have been in favour of all these moves, and I think a lot of the players would be, and there's a lot of benefits to these things, and the league's moving forward in so many ways, but these little changes could help it continue to move forward further.
Yeah, and I think that's where the NBL's got to be proactive in some of these things and just being ahead of the curve. I think they've done a great job over the last 2 years, and then definitely something to consider. Hopefully, probably I'm sure they'll have some meetings here here coming up, owners meeting. So maybe we'll hear some positive news coming out of there and some new initiatives that they'll bring to get the NBL up into one of the top leagues in Australia and New Zealand sport, and just make it, on the front of people's minds when they're thinking about where they want to spend their money and I guess support a team.
Absolutely. Let's just run through some of the main talking points. And of course, we're here on Basketball Hustle thanks to Hoop 7. Let's make no bones about it. This show wouldn't be happening without the support of Hoop 7. So thanks to them for their great support right throughout our season so far. They couldn't be treating us any better, and hopefully you're all supporting them in return for the support that they're giving us. Now, we touched on the Taipans and the Wildcats a little bit earlier, but I just want to expand a little bit on how you see both of those teams. The Taipans, with their 3-game winning streak before their loss to Perth, they had moved into the top 4. Do you see them as a top 4 team, or how do you see them ending up finishing later in the season?
I think they'll be very competitive for that top 4. I'm just not sure they've got the depth to be able to get that top 4 spot. I think it's going to be extremely competitive. I guess the wild card there would be the Phoenix as well, and how many road games they still have. I think Adelaide's got a chance to go on a run. So, I wouldn't put it past the Taipans, but I don't have them in the top 4 at the moment. But give me a few weeks, and I might change my mind like Corey Homicide Williams.
Let's just try to see if we can stick to one opinion for more than a day or two. The Perth Wildcats, they're now, 2 weeks ago, I asked you on the show if you were concerned about them. Now they've gone on to win 3 games in a row, and if they win again tomorrow against Brisbane at home, and if Sydney loses to Melbourne, I think they'll be pretty close to being on the same record as Sydney. They might only be 1 game behind. All of a sudden, do you see the Wildcats as being back right in that championship mix once again?
Yeah, I do. And 2 losses from the Kings. I probably didn't expect that loss at home to Cairns. Yeah, it's one of those things. I still think Sydney finishes on top just with the talent that they have. But and the Wildcats, they don't play too many home games over the next month and a half as well. So they're going to have to try and get road games while they're out over that Christmas period, New Year's, and so their schedule, although it's been tough to this date, and they've done a pretty good job. I think it will become a little bit tougher. Not a lot of home games, but then they finish strong as well. So I think they'll be in the top 2, and I think Sydney will finish top. But the injuries is always the wild card in this as well. And, if a key guy from one of those teams goes down, then it changes the equation.
The only concern I have is with the big man, because it looks like, as we saw in Cairns, the team plays better when they go smaller. So whether it's Jesse or Reece playing either the 4 or 5 spot alongside Nick Kay, that looks like the go-to lineup for Trevor when a game's on the line and when the game needs to be won. So that means that we're seeing Majuk and Dario Hunt spend a lot of time on the bench, especially in second half of games. We've seen both of them start at different times and play most of the first quarters, but we really don't see them that often, especially in the second halves of games. Are you concerned about the bigs, or do you think the team can just get it done by going to the small ball lineup when they need to?
Well, in today's modern basketball, you look at that fourth quarter, and they had 5 guys that could all shoot the 3. I mean, Nick Kay is second in the league in 3-point percentage at the moment, and he's your 5-man. Jesse Wagstaff, Bryce Cotton, Clint Steindl, those guys can all hit 3s, not to mention Tariq White as well. So it's a lineup that I like from the Wildcats. I think Trevor Gleason will use it a little bit more as well. And Dario Hunt, I'm not too concerned about him. I think he's going to provide. He's going to have some decent games. The one thing I like that he does is when he plays hard. Yeah. And that's the one thing Trevor Gleason, he made a couple of turnovers and probably some errors that you probably wouldn't see. And I know there's going to be people that are saying, oh, he's an import. He should be doing this. He should be doing that. I mean, you've got Tariq White. You've got Bryce Cotton. You got 2 outstanding imports. You don't need a third guy that's going to score. He's just got to do his job. And let's be honest, Nick Kay can play the 4 or 5 and do extremely well. So he's a luxury right there. He was first team All NBL. So it's not something that you're losing too much when you put him at the 5.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's been a little bit of talk sort of floating around if they need to replace him with a different import. That's Dario Hunt, but I don't think there's another area you would add an import. You wouldn't add an import to be a 2 or 3 man to add to Bryce or Tariko, because those two have got that area covered and they're already well backed up by Clint, as we've talked about. You wouldn't add another point guard because Damo and Mitch Norton are doing a good job there. So really, if you replaced him as an import, you'd only be replacing him with another big. And at this point of the year, I don't think you would find someone better at this point anyway. So I think any talk of replacing him would be misguided, I would have thought.
Yeah, unless the Cairns Taipans want to make a trade, well, sure. Cam Oliver for Dario Hunt. Yeah, I don't think you're going to find someone that's going to fit the bill, because I don't think there's too many more Cam Olivers out there just floating around as free agents.
Well, that's another talking point. Let's go down that rabbit hole for a minute. I'm not sure if you were planning on talking about it later in the show or not. If you were, let me know. There has been some talk about installing the ability to trade players in the NBL, whether it's in the off-season or even you might be able to do it during the season. And you have a look at, some of the reasons were injuries, I guess, for somebody or injuries, or if somebody gets waived, like a Kwani who's now finding himself out of a job at Sydney because of the arrival of Xavier Cooks, or, injuries might pop up and somebody might just be a better fit. Somebody might need a big, somebody might need a guard, so you can do a trade for that. Firstly, during a season, would you be open to that, or what do you think?
I would find it very hard as a player in this day and age. Now, we have talked about going towards NBA style of game and aligning the league, but I just think there's only 9 teams. It's not like you got 30 teams and you got different teams. You look at the NBA, you got some teams that are just purely rebuilding, and then you've got other teams that are trying to win championships, and you got other teams that are just kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I think it's a different landscape there, and to pick up and move in the middle of a season, I can understand maybe in the off season, and you can kind of plan your life around that. You'd have to figure out some type of compensation, I guess, for the players and the moving and all that. I mean, when you're in the NBA and you're earning millions of dollars, a little bit of moving costs isn't going to worry you too much, but that's not the case here in the NBL. So it would be a different, and I think a lot of times people come back to play in the NBL because of the lifestyle. So you get some guys that come back from Europe and they want to live out here. They know where they're going to live. They got family, friends. So I'm not so sold. I don't see the huge benefit. Maybe in the off season, and there's been times in the past where teams have shopped players and that have been under contract, and they say, we'll pay half their guaranteed money if you'll take them and cover the rest. So that's happened, and I don't mind that, but straight up trade players, I think there's maybe in the off season, but not during season.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think in Australia I think people are too settled in where they live. You don't, like you said, you don't make the amount of money. If a guy's making $50,000 a year, he's not in an environment where he can then pick up and move cities all of a sudden during a season. But in the off season, I think it has some merit. I think if somebody's stuck under a contract and is going to be caught playing we saw it only a couple of years ago with Cody Ellis at Illawarra and also Tom Garlip at Sydney. They were under contract to their clubs, but their clubs didn't want them. And they were forced to sit on the end of the bench for a whole season and not play. And in the end, it ended both of their careers. Neither of them have played in the NBL since, and that was the end of their careers. But if those clubs in the off-season, they knew that they weren't going to play them, they could have traded them somewhere else and both of them were capable of playing somewhere else. So I think there's incidents in the off-season where you could definitely trade players where guys are stuck under contract and you can't move them any other way.
Yeah, I agree with that. And those are some good scenarios where I think it would be beneficial to a player. If a team knows that they signed, look like Sydney, Xavier Cooks wasn't available a month ago, but then he became available. So, I mean, you've got to sign the best players that are available. And unfortunately for Kwani, he's the odd man looking out. And the thing is, though, now he's a free agent, so he could sign with someone. So it's not like he can go, they're just keeping him and not playing him.
I guess nobody has a free roster spot, do they? So someone would have to cut somebody to sign him.
Yeah, and that's where the other issue I think the league has. They need a few more teams, and hopefully this Tasmania team comes through because there's just so much talent in the league. And you add in the 3 imports. I just love to see a lot more spots open up for the Aussies and the Kiwis and give them a little bit more opportunities that some guys, sitting on the bench and playing only a couple minutes a game.
Yeah, and that's the other benefit of what you've talked about with the 48 minutes. Suddenly, those 2 minutes can turn into 6 minutes or 7 minutes, and it can lead to playing well enough to further your career down the track. The other team I wanted to get your thoughts on were the Sydney Kings. They lost twice last week in Perth. They were terribly outplayed from the start. They never looked likely. And then I think it was even a bigger surprise that they didn't bounce back at home to Cairns on Sunday. Full credit to Cairns for the way they played. But if you take out Casper Ware catching fire in the fourth quarter when he hit 21 points, they were clearly outplayed by the Taipans as well. Were you concerned by what you saw from the Kings?
No, and I'll tell you why. And I go back to my experience with the Wildcats, probably the most talented team we had during my time, 2014. We had James Ennis that year, and we started out 12-1, went into the Christmas break. We were thinking we couldn't lose. It came back, and I think we lost 3 of our next 4, and probably needed that. As a team, you just needed a little bit of a reality check. Obviously, the Wildcats outplayed them on the Friday night and just outworked them. To be honest, it was one of those things. Wildcats were desperate. Looked like Sydney just came over and didn't have their usual intensity, and they had been the best defensive team in the league. So they've got to get back to playing that brand of basketball. They've got some fantastic defenders. I thought Kevin Lish looked pretty rusty from being off for so long and trying to work him in. He's only going to get better. So it's a scenario where, you don't want to lose. They're still in first place, and I wouldn't be too concerned if I was the Kings fans. I think they'll be fine. And I really like the way Will Weaver has that team playing. I was impressed being on the sideline Friday night's game, being able to go into his huddle and see him coach in the front row. I was impressed in the way he handles the team.
Now, we talked about the Breakers again last week. We talked about the fact that Glen Rice Jr. was going to be playing with them in Cairns. He ended up playing. He ended up scoring 30 points. And he ended up playing a nice individual game. But that's what it was. It was an individual game in a team that never looked likely to win. And he pretty much played ISO ball every time he touched it. And then 24 hours later, he's back in Auckland and he finds himself breaking his bail conditions, getting arrested again. Then the next day after that, he's finally released from his contract officially from the Breakers. And I think finally we'll never see him again in the league, which is a shame because he's a talented player. But if somebody has these sort of off-field issues, then they've got more important things to be worrying about than playing basketball. And obviously trying to stay out of jail is probably the main one. But we've talked about it on the show before, so we don't need to go into it fully in terms of the culture that it means the Breakers are willing to accept if they firstly bring somebody with that reputation in, and then he gets arrested once, and then they're happy for him to come back and play again. But did anything that happened over the weekend overly surprise you? I guess with his history, we probably should have expected it.
Well, I can't believe that they would play it in that game up in Cairns. And I just send a huge message to the fan base, to the players that, if you're a talented player, it overcomes a lot of things, especially culture-wise. And then you got to look at it. Would he have played if Scotty Hobson and Corey Webster were healthy or weren't healthy in that next game?
No.
Because those guys came back. So did they release him because they got those guys back?
Well, I think he had to be released because Hobson came back, yeah.
So you just wonder, they say, he broke his bail conditions, but were they always going to release him and they were just playing him just purely because they didn't have those guys for the game up in Cairns? But it's got to be a frustrating situation there for a lot of those guys that I know have been part of some successful teams. So it'll be interesting to see if they do make some changes, I guess, later on in the season and what their focus is. But from the outside looking in, it doesn't have a great look for the club's culture at the moment.
No, and I think a lot of the reasons why they went on to win that game against Brisbane on Monday was because he wasn't there. As talented as he is, all of a sudden both Abercrombie and Finn Delaney could see the ball a bit more, and they both played really good games on Monday when they virtually didn't touch the ball at all in that game in Cairns on the Friday. I know you get Hobson and Webster back, which makes an obvious difference as well, but the benefits you get from suddenly your own local players like Abercrombie and Delaney being able to do their thing again, I think that's what you have to stick with, and those are the guys that you're going to have to build your franchise around moving forward. So they should be your focus right now, not somebody like Glen Rice.
Yeah, and it should have been a short leash on Glen Rice, even if with his past. So something happens, we're making a change. You got one chance, not 3 or 4 like it seems like he has. So it's disappointing, and I'm sure they're learning a lot through this process.
Sticking with the Breakers, RJ Hampton has now been ruled out for more than a month with a hip injury, and we've also got LaMelo Ball ruled out for more than a month with a foot injury. They've been incredible for the league with the attention that they've brought this season. Both of them have played some terrific basketball. I think it's almost a consensus now that LaMelo will be the number 1 draft pick next year, and I think everyone sees RJ as at least a top 5 pick. But I think the question has to be asked now, have we seen the last of them in the NBL?
Well, I find it interesting, a lot of times, and I know this was for me my first year out as a professional player, once the holidays hit, and especially even when I was in college, you just wanted to go spend that time with family.
Yeah.
And, we're into the festive season now, a couple weeks out. You just wonder if that's kind of playing into these injuries as well. And are they going to be around over that holiday period? It remains to be seen. And the hard part too is if they do go back, then go back to America, stay to rehab. What happens? Are they going to come back? Will they get back into their familiar family, friends, environments? Are they going to want to come back here? Especially with LaMelo Ball, as you touched on it, many are considering him already a lock for that number 1 pick. So what help does he have for his draft coming if he comes back and potentially gets injured? So it'll be an interesting one how it plays out. I know they've come out and they've said that they're here for the season, but when you got an NBA team knocking on your door saying we're going to take you number 1, why would you risk it? We'll see how it all plays out.
I'm just not sure there's any benefit in them playing any further now. Obviously you can't go any higher than number 1, and that's where the LaMelo looks like he's going. And I think RJ's ceiling probably is the number 5 pick, and that's where he looks like he's done enough to get picked up now as well. Is there any point to them? I know both the Breakers and the Hawks and the NBL as a whole would love to see them back, but from their point of view, is there any point coming back?
Yeah, I don't see a whole lot, especially with their teams probably out of the playoffs as well, and not making the finals. That, to me, that's the kicker that you throw into the works as well, is that, they're playing for these teams that it's going to be highly unlikely that they're going to be able to make it. Now, Illawarra, they made some changes, and they very well could get themselves back into the thick of things if they rattle off a few wins, but it's unlikely at this stage. But you just never know in this league and how good these new guys will be.
Well, from 3 and 10, it's a long way back. But you mentioned the new signings. They've signed 2 new imports, Darrington Hobson and Billy Preston. Do you know much about either of them?
Look, I know Billy Preston played at Kansas, had a little stint in the NBA, and he's definitely got some potential. So I'm excited to see if he can, the name that he's built up over the couple of years and the excitement that he's had, if he can replicate that over here in the NBL. And let's hope for Illawarra's case that as long as they've waited to sign someone that they're worth the wait.
Absolutely. Now, there's been plenty to talk about. We're only just getting started here on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle for this week, and thanks again to Hoop 7 for making this happen. Thanks for, I guess it was a bit of a recap and a bit of a look back on all of the topics happening in the league right now. But as we're at the midpoint way of the season, most teams have played around the 14 or 15 game mark now, so we've just finished round 10 in a 20 round season. So we're at the halfway point of the season. We gave a lot of our predictions at the start of the season, so we promised that we would hold ourselves to account on what we predicted here, Shawn, on the show. So let's have a look at our thoughts now at the mid-season, and it's been a fascinating season so far. Let's start with our championship picks that we had at the start of the season. I picked Melbourne United. You went for the Sydney Kings. Have you got any reason to change your thoughts right now?
No, I'm sticking with the Kings. I just like the mix that they have, and once Kevin Lish gets healthy, I think it's going to make them even deeper and more dangerous team.
I would probably be swayed to go towards Sydney too now as my championship pick. We both had Sydney and Melbourne in the grand final though. Do you expect that to happen?
Look, it's going to be tough. I guess the wild card with Melbourne United is that they've got Casey Prather still to. I know he's played the last few weeks, but when he comes back and gets 100% healthy, I think he's going to be a wild card that could put them over say the Perth Wildcats in a semifinal series. So it's I think it's between the Kings United and the Wildcats, and to me it's going to be who's healthy and who's playing their best basketball at the end of the season. So there's still a long way to go.
Mm.
Now, our top 4 picks. At the start of the season, I had Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, and Adelaide. You had Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Southeast Melbourne. I'm still going to stick with the same top 3, but I'm going to probably have Cairns as my 4th team right now. What does your top 4 look like?
No, I'm sticking with the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix in that 4th spot. Obviously, the top 3 I think are pretty set in stone. We don't have to argue that. But to me, Ty Wesley still coming back into that Melbourne Phoenix team is going to make them dangerous once he gets his timing and his touch back. He'll be a dominant player again, and I think he's going to really complement Mitch Creek.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. My only concern over the Phoenix is the amount of road games they'll have in the second half of the season. The Taipans, they just play such exciting basketball right now, and I guess it's more of a fact that I'd love to see them make the top 4. Maybe it's wishful thinking that I've got them in that 4th spot. Let's go. Where do you want to go next? MVP. You had Jerome Randall coming into the season. I had Bryce Cotton. I'm pretty comfortable with Bryce, but I have a feeling you probably would change your pick halfway through.
Yeah, I don't think Jerome Randall has had the impact that I thought he would coming back to the 36ers, and I probably shouldn't have gone away from my man Bryce to get the MVP. I just thought sometimes the attention that he would get from defenses would make it hard at times. But he's just having an outstanding season. So I am going to change mine to Bryce as the favorite at the moment.
Who do you think's hot on his heels? To me, Sean Long and Scotty Machado look to be the next 2 off the cab. Who would you have as sort of second and third?
Yeah, I think you could throw Casper Ware in there as well as Sydney Kings are playing, and even Mitch Creek. I think he's been fantastic for the Phoenix so far. He's second in the league in scoring for a guy that's probably not known as a pure scorer in the way that Phoenix are playing as well. So I think that you got to throw him into the conversation.
Now, we decided not to choose Rookie of the Year because it's a bit of a funny one. I don't like the fact that the next star players are eligible for the Rookie of the Year given their international players. So we decided to tip who we thought would be the best of the next star players at the start of the season, and I think we both said Didi Lozada at the start of the season. I think I would change that to LaMelo Ball right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't even think we have to discuss that one. LaMelo Ball, 2 triple-doubles. He's just 17 points a game. He's been outstanding for Illawarra, and what he's been able to produce here as an 18-year-old, it's pretty impressive. And
I don't think that's even any disrespect to Didi, because I think Didi has shown that he's a terrific player right now, and I think this time next year he's going to be a very solid NBA player. So I don't think that's any disrespect to him that we don't think he's as good as LaMelo right now, because I still think, I guess I expect the 3 of them to all become very good NBA players.
Yeah, I think they've all got long-term careers in the NBA. Didi Lozada, I think that separates him from the other 2 is just his shooting ability. Yeah. And we know how much the NBA values that. So it's, as any league in the world is, if you can make shots, you can play. And I think Didi Lozada is probably the better shooter out of all 3 of those.
Most improved players are a fascinating one. I reckon we've genuinely got 5 or 6 candidates this season. Coming into the season, I went for Will Magnay from Brisbane, and that, he's done nothing to really change my mind. You hedged your bets a little bit with Majuk Deng and Jack McVeigh. Both of those have got strong cases to make as well, but you can throw in Dane Pinot in there as well. You can throw in probably Sean Bruce as well. There's a lot of guys you can throw into the mix.
Yeah, I don't think there's a clear-cut winner. I think Sean Bruce and what he's been able to do has been pretty, especially on a Kings team that's stacked. Sunday Dead, I think he's really relishing in a lot more minutes. So Majuk Deng, I love the way he's able to grasp the opportunity he's had up in the Taipans. So there's no clear-cut winner at this stage. I would probably hedge my bets towards dissecting, or even Sean Bruce.
I might actually go Dane Pino, but I'd be happy for any of them. They're all right in the mix. And one of your other tips, Jack McVeigh, probably first 7 or 8 rounds, he was leading that category as well. So he's more than capable of if he can recapture some of that form, of being in the mix as well. I think it's a great positive that we've got so many players that are stepping up that are probably some of the lesser names. I think we talk about all the superstars on the show all the time and talk about the next stars, but we've got a lot of other guys that are making a big impact this season too.
Yeah, it's exciting that you love to see guys when they get those opportunities just be able to come out and make the most of it, and those guys are doing that.
This is another fascinating one. The best defensive player, it's going to be the Damian Martin Award at some point in the future. To me, I've got him winning the award so far this season too. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to go away from the way he plays defense. I would also throw in maybe Cam Oliver.
Yeah.
The way he's leading the league in block shots and right up there in rebounding. The presence he has in the middle is pretty impressive. And I like Casper Ware as well, and then probably Mitch Creek as defenders. I think they do an outstanding job. But if I want one guy to guard the opposition's best player, you're going to pick Damian Martin any day of the week.
I can't argue with that at all. He's got my vote right now, and so for somebody to be able to win games from a defensive end, he did it in Adelaide. For a guy to be able to win a game just through his defense, it's just a very, very rare thing. So for right now, he's on track for a 7th best defensive player of the year award, which is just incredible. The best 6th man. This is another one that we've got some pretty handy candidates. I don't think we did this tip at the start of the season. We couldn't fit everything in. Right now, I reckon it's probably out of Jason Cadee and Sean Bruce. But if Eric Griffin continues to come off the bench for Adelaide, then he might end up being my tip at the end of the season.
Yeah, I just never was a big fan of an import getting the 6th man of the year award. I don't know why, but it was never it never sat well with me when those guys, because they're kind of expected to come in, make an impact, and be starters. So it's just a matter of how they get used. I don't think there's anything wrong with them getting the 6th man. I don't know. It's just hard for me to vote for that. But I do like the way Sean Bruce comes in and provides an impact. So you could throw in. There's a few guys, but I don't think there's anyone really out that clearly has that award locked up at the moment.
Yeah, I think Cadee and Bruce would be the 2 leading candidates, but anyone could step up throughout the second half of the season. Coach of the Year, another fascinating one. I would think, to me, I was tossing up between Mike Kelly and Will Weaver. I ended up going with Mike Kelly. Who are you choosing between, first of all, and who did you settle with?
Yeah, I went with Will Weaver at this stage, and 2 reasons. 1, their record, and 2, you just look at that. They had a lot of the same guys last year. You swap out Casper Ware and Jerome Randall, but they look like a different team. And I guess what kind of probably settled my mind on that was just watching the way Will Weaver coached on the weekend. The team wasn't going well, but it just seemed like he had a good control of the team and had them in the right spot. They just weren't playing as hard as they needed to be, which is going to happen at some stage throughout the season. They were sitting 12-1, so I like Will Weaver, but I think you're right. Mike Kelly's got that Cairns team after a hard season last year, slow start this year. They're probably playing some of the best basketball in the NBL at the moment.
Yeah, the thing I like about what Mike's done is that I think they got their team wrong last year in terms of the makeup with the 3 imports that were all guards. But this year they've signed the right pieces, they've got the right mix of players, and he has them playing well together. So that's why I went with Mike. But yeah, it's tough to make a case against Will Weaver because you can have a talented team like he's got in Sydney, but it's the coach's job to make them click. And you can argue that Andrew Gaze had as much talent to work with, especially in his first 2 years, and they were they just weren't around the mark. So I think the coach deserves a lot of credit for having a team with that much talent playing together, because in some ways it's a harder job than getting a team playing well that has less talent, because you need to keep everybody happy and you need to keep everybody motivated. And as you know, that doesn't always happen when you've got superstars all fighting for the spotlight.
No, I agree. And that's 100% right there. I think something we haven't really talked about with Cairns as well is how well DJ Newell's playing.
Yeah,
18 points a game, shooting 42% from the 3-point line. There's probably a lot of people that weren't too happy with him coming back. I loved him when he was at New Zealand Breakers.
Yeah.
Thought he was solid last year, but he's playing some good basketball this year.
Absolutely. Playing really good defense too. He's doing a great job. And also as a leader, he's one of the co-captains there now and he's leading that group too. So he has a lot going for him. All first team. This is a tricky one because I reckon between the all first and all second team, there's probably 20 players that have a good case to be included. There's only 10 spots there. Did you pick both teams? Did you go for a first and second team or just your first team?
No, I got a first and second.
Why don't you start with your second team? Who did you have?
So for my second team, I've got LaMelo Trimble, Roberson, Lamar Patterson, Nick Kay, and Cam Oliver.
Okay, I went pretty similar. So I had Casper Ware, and I assume he's not in yours because he's in your first team. I also had Melo Trimble, I had Lamar Patterson, I had Shawn Tate, and I had Cam Oliver. So pretty similar.
Yeah, the one that I like Shawn Tate, and I like Nick Kay. So those two guys, I had a hard time figuring out who to go with, but I do believe Red, so I just kind of went towards Nick Kay.
Well, I actually had Nick Kay in my first team, so I'll get to that in a second. What have you got for your first team?
So I've got, the way the NBL does it, they have 3 basically outside players and 2 inside players. So, that's kind of the way I voted. So I've got Casper, Bryce, Scott Machado, Mitch Creek, and Sean Long. So I've basically kind of got 3 point guards, maybe 2 point guards, and a shooting guard. But I just thought those 3. I was just trying to look at the list, and I'm like, how am I going to take one of those guys out? They're all playing outstanding basketball.
Well, yeah, I guess that was the thing I was weighing up, and I ended up going Casper in the second team. So I had in the first team Scott Machado, Bryce Cotton, Mitch Creek, Nick Kay, and Sean Long.
Yeah, I can't argue with your team as well. I think that's right there. You put Mitch Creek at the 3, Nick Kay at the 4. So I think those guys are all deserving. It's so hard.
Yeah, it's tough. Like I said, there's easily 20 guys that could have made it. Daniel Johnson's probably the unluckiest one. He was the hardest one I found to leave out of both teams.
Yeah, and I think for me, I always try and throw in the team success into it. I think that to me, that's the tiebreaker. If your team's doing well, if you're in the top 4, or you're probably doing better than you were expected to do, that gives you an edge over someone else that probably got similar stats or a similar performance. But DJ is so consistent, and he had that huge. But he's been a little bit.
He's been up and down.
He's so consistent, but he has been a little bit up and down this year as well. He's had that huge game against the Wildcats, and then he'll have 2 or 4 points. So it's been feast or famine sometimes with him. But over his career, you look at his numbers from year to year, he's very consistent.
Absolutely. What are you made of the season overall, Sean? Now that we got our award winners out of the way, this season, do you feel like the league has taken some huge steps forward, both in terms of the way it's perceived in the overall, I guess, sporting landscape, but also the actual product on the floor? Do you feel like everything is moving in a really positive direction?
I do think, you're adding these next stars. You've got 3 imports. The talent in the league has never been better. You're able to get some of these European guys that were earning good money over there to come back and play in the NBL. So it's exciting times, and I think that I think the NBL really has to try and capitalize on the momentum that they've built over the last couple of years. And it sounds like there's a possibility of a Tasmanian team coming in and just getting this league up to where it needs to be. But it's exciting times to be a part of the league, and I think that there's a few tweaks and continual improvement. They'll get where they want to be.
Now, that's our mid-season wrap done here on Hoop 7's Basketball Hustle. And that was all brought to you by Devlin's. You can head to Devlin's in Subiaco or at devlinsonline.com.au, and especially this close to Christmas. If you have, I don't know how many female fans and listeners we have, Sean, but if you do have a male partner, head into Devlin's and get him something for Christmas, because you'll be able to find something quite comfortably there. Or if you've got a dad, if you've got a brother, if you've got any sort of male in your life, that is the place to go to get them something for Christmas. But in terms of Simon Devlin as a fan, Sean, was there anybody that made a bigger impact from the other side of the fence during your career than Simon?
No, I mean, there's been a few super fans, but just the way he goes at the opposition's best players and pretty creative with it. I was sideline of the Sydney game, and there was some good banter going on between him and some of the Kings players, and it's
especially based on play, I noticed.
One of the things the opposition players is I think Simon Devlin's pretty smart with who he attacks as well. Mm-hmm. He knows the guys that will respond back to him, and Shawn Tate didn't let him down.
Which opposition fans really got under your skin? Did any of them really cut close to the bone that you noticed?
Well, look, I probably would say the ones that were the most vocal were Illawarra.
Yeah.
They would put them right behind your bench and probably had a few words that you hope your kids weren't sitting nearby, just letting you know how bad you were going that night. So they were probably the most vocal, and you really, I guess for me, it always just made a win there even sweeter knowing that you had these opposition fans yelling at you.
Now, a couple of other things quickly before we head into a preview for round 11. Two men have some big milestones this weekend, and two men that your career is very closely linked to. Firstly, Trevor Gleeson, 400 games in the NBL. He celebrated with a win up in Cairns. You were coming towards the end of your career, and I imagine you probably had maybe some awkward conversations with him as your role was starting to wind down towards the end of your career. How did you find Trevor as a coach, and how do you look back on him in terms of your coaches during your career now?
Well, look, I think one of the things Trevor has, he knows his system front to back, and he really sticks with it and tries to find the guys that are going to fit well in there. And, the success that he's had, I mean, a lot of people talk about the success that he had at the Wildcats, but I look at what he did at Townsville as well. I mean, you're talking about a team, probably not the biggest budget, but they were always competitive. And I thought the one year they lost in the finals that they probably should have won it that year as well. That they had a great chance to get through there and win that championship in Townsville. But his teams were always tough to beat, competitive, and he's taken that to the Wildcats and probably taken it to another level. So 400 games in the NBL, and to me as well, it's impressive. He went to Melbourne, didn't have the greatest experience there, and he's come over here and found a home and done some remarkable things. So credit to him for the success that he has. And, I have a tremendous amount of respect for him as a coach and the way he goes about it. And you're not going to find someone that works harder. I mean, he would come in, he would be there before any of the players get there, developing his practice plans and just getting the team ready. And the team was going to be prepared when we took the floor.
Then there's Damian Martin. He plays his 300th game for the Wildcats this weekend. What more can you say about him except I guess what we talked about last week, where clearly he's the best Wildcat this decade. He's won 5 championships, 6 Defensive Player of the Year awards, and he's been the face of the club almost since he took over that role from you.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what he's been able to do coming over here from the West Sydney Razorbacks, and you just look at those photos when he first arrived and where he is at now. And just the command he has of his team out there on the court is so impressive, and he's fun to watch. From a guy who just loves basketball and just those intricacies of what players can bring to a team, I'm just amazed. He's one guy that you just watch on the defensive end, and you just watch his energy and his footwork and the way he can disrupt things. It's a beautiful thing to see from a basketball purist.
Now, before I get your tips on round 11, did you have a favourite Looney Tunes character growing up?
Look, I didn't have a favorite Looney Tunes character, but I guess it's great to see the Looney Tunes. I visited Movie World a few years ago with the kids, and we had a great time. So I was probably some other characters and cartoons that I watch, but it's this league is about families and kids and getting them out to watch the game. So it's great to see the NBL aligned with Warner Brothers.
Yeah, for anyone that doesn't know what we're talking about, the league will have a Looney Tunes round where every club will wear a uniform that has a Looney Tunes character of some form emblazoned on it, whether it's Sylvester for the Wildcats or Daffy Duck for the Sydney Kings or Marvin the Martian for Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, or I think it's Bugs Bunny at Melbourne United. I think it might be, is it the Roadrunner for the Hawks and Tweety for the New Zealand Breakers. So check them out at the NBL website if you get a chance. Some of the designs are pretty striking, so I imagine they'll be pretty popular with some of the younger audience. Let's have a look at round 11 now. We started in Cairns on Thursday night. Just to put it on the record, who would have you tipped between Cairns and the Perth Wildcats?
I think probably would have tipped Cairns, just the way they were playing and coming back home and knowing that the Wildcats were on the road. So, and they beat them twice in a row already this season. It would have been hard to pass up Cairns. And it was kind of a reversal of what we saw in Cairns a few weeks ago where the Wildcats kind of dominated the first three quarters, and then Cairns just stormed home. Wildcats did the same, down 9, or went on a 9-0 run to start that fourth quarter. So it was a little bit of a reversal of fortunes.
Yeah, I think I would have gone for Cairns as well. So that's another loss for us both. Friday night in Adelaide, Mitch Creek's return to Adelaide, first ever time as an opposition player. The 36ers take on the Phoenix. I think the winner will end up in 4th position at the end of the night. It's a big game.
It is a huge game, and I'm tipping Adelaide in this one. I think Joey Wright will have his team. A little bit of a disappointing performance last week for the 36ers, and I think they'll bounce back with a huge win at home.
Then on Saturday, Melbourne United, Sydney Kings. This is massive every time these two teams play.
Yeah, I mean, you got our two favorites to get into the grand final at the start of the year. You got a feeling that Melbourne United is starting to really click once they get Casey Prather 100% healthy. I think they'll be even more dangerous. But I think the Sydney Kings will respond to 2 losses last week and get a big win here.
Yeah, that'd be a big road win for them. And also on Saturday, this one has, even though the Wildcats will be a little bit, I guess, league weary coming back from Cairns, this has some danger signs as a blowout in my mind. What do you think, Wildcats and the Brisbane Bullets?
Well, let's not forget Brisbane's won here the last couple of years, so they do have some, and they've done it in surprising ways that you wouldn't expect it as well. So, yeah, I wouldn't put past the win for Brisbane, but I think the way Perth Wildcats are playing, especially the last few weeks, and coming back home and knowing that, you know, they're a lot closer to that first spot than they were a few weeks ago. It could really spur them on to, I guess, to get some more wins to try and challenge Sydney for that top spot. I'm picking the Wildcats.
Then on Sunday, New Zealand Breakers, we just don't know what we're going to get from them. They host the 36ers who've got a pretty short turnaround, having played Friday night at home.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the home team here because of, you know, them getting back Corey Webster, Hobson. I think it's going to really settle that club down, knowing that Glen Rice Jr. is finally done with them, and they can kind of focus on a little bit more basketball than off-court distraction. So I'm going to go with the New Zealand Breakers, especially with Adelaide having to play on Friday night at home and then having to travel. So I think it's going to make it tough.
Another one with implications for that 4th position, the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix host the Cairns Taipans on Sunday.
Yeah, that one is an interesting one. I'd say it's a huge game for both of them, and the context of it and that top 4 spot. You know, we talk about Adelaide and the Phoenix and Cairns kind of being in the running for that spot. So I think I'm going to go with the Phoenix, just knowing that they're at home. But I love the way Cairns is playing at the moment. So I think that one's going to go down to the wire. We'll see who can hit the big shot to win it. But I'm going to pick Phoenix just being at home.
And last up, Monday night, the new look Illawarra Hawks, now that there's no LaMelo and they've got a couple of new imports, but it looks like the job's ahead of them, even at home against Melbourne United.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough for them to get that win, try and settle these guys. But, they're going to have huge games from a few different guys that you probably wouldn't expect. But I'm going to go with United, and they're going to try and push for that top 2 spot. So it's going to be each game is going to be pretty important for United to be able to get home court advantage come final time.
There we go. We'll see how it plays out. Big show, Shawn. Plenty to cover. Hopefully everybody enjoyed our look back on the season so far and our mid-season recap and our mid-season award winners. There was plenty of news to cover from right across the league. Plenty to now look ahead to for the rest of round 11. Thanks again to Hoop 7 for making this all happen, and thank you to the support also from ID Athletic and to Devlin's. And now let's let everyone keep moving, Shawn. But before we go, what are your final thoughts for this week?
Well, here's my final thoughts. We didn't get to it in our award winners, but I guess for me the most disappointing so far this season has been Cam Glidden. Let's see how the second half plays out. We know what he's capable of. We've seen him score 30 points and be game winners, but at the moment he's averaging 6 points. He's only taken 16 two-pointers out of his 68 field goal attempts. So to me, that says you're not being aggressive. You're not attacking. And I'm not sure what's happening there, but I'd love to see the Cam Glen that we know come back in the second half of the season, and maybe a trip back to his home WA will kickstart his season, and he can have a big second half of the year.
Bye, have a great time.